In John's Gospel, Jesus refers to himself as the Good Shepherd. And the psalm that is associated with this passage is, not surprisingly, the 23rd Psalm, "The Lord's my shepherd." So we're going to think about our trust in Jesus as he leads us through life. I imagine that most of you have by now had one of your vaccinations, and possibly a lot of you too as well. For you then, the anxieties that have been expressed about the AstraZeneca vaccine and its possible side effects are purely academic, but it's something that's caused a lot of concern for many people. The precise details seem complicated and still rather obscure. However, it's certainly extremely rare, to such an extent that people have difficulty in trying to appreciate the risk in comparison to all the other risks we take in our life all the time. What should be clear is that the point is that the regulatory body, the MHRA, is being very cautious. They're not sure that there's a significant problem, but they think that the safest course of action, given what they know now, is to recommend that people under the age of 30 should be offered an alternative vaccine. What people should do is accept that they, the MHRA, are being very careful and doing all the worrying and being as cautious as is necessary. We don't have to do it as well. It makes no sense to put in our caution on top of theirs. But that is what a lot of people are doing, to some extent encouraged by the media. There's no point in us trying to decide whether the MHRA has got it right. We have neither the details nor the expertise. We have to trust them and accept their decision. But people find it difficult to simply trust. We're encouraged to question things. Of course, we live in a world where there are some people who do deliberately lie or carelessly make mistakes and lead to misleading stories about things. Some politicians even seem to think that's an appropriate way to behave. We certainly need to be sceptical about unsolicited phone calls, text messages and other schemes to scam us. And there's certainly a lot of fake news out there, even if that expression itself has come to be misused. So we become extremely cautious. But people become cautious about trust itself. Trust is seen as naive, foolish, and unsophisticated. The point is that it's not trust itself which is wrong. The question is who to trust. One of the bizarre things that has happened during this pandemic is that many people seem to prefer to trust someone they don't know who's posted some bizarre idea on social media rather than the properly appointed medical experts. You do have to trust some people. You have to trust the pilot on the plane. We cannot all offer our opinion on how to fly the plane. I've learnt with my own health that the thing to do is to trust. When I need medical advice, I choose my doctor and then I trust their decisions completely. I don't try and backseat drive, offering my advice and view on what to do. We trust people we know well. I suppose sometimes we know people so well that we can trust that they will be late, that they will forget, or that they won't do what we wanted them to. But generally, the better we know someone, the more we are likely to accept their version of events, their behaviour. As Christians, we have to trust Jesus, and hopefully that is because we know him. As part of that, reading from John, Jesus says, "I know my sheep, and my sheep know me." It's a relatively unique passage from John's Gospel. It's as near as we get to parables in John. One of the significant differences of John's Gospel from the other three is the lack of parables. This section doesn't contain a parable in the form we're used to from the other Gospels. There's no clear story. One can perhaps imagine that there are a couple of stories about shepherds and sheepfolds that have become the basis for this passage. Firstly, there's the image of the door of the sheepfold. I expect you're familiar with the idea that shepherds did literally become the door of their fold by lying down and going to sleep in the entrance. And then there's a story of a hired shepherd who's not committed to the job and runs away when a wolf appears, not out of fear for his own safety and disregarding the safety of the sheep. The good shepherd stays and protects the sheep from attack, even at risk to himself. The passage goes on to talk about the sacrifice Jesus makes by laying down his life. That's got away from the image of the shepherd. There's a lot of theology in these verses, but for the moment I want to just focus on the idea of the shepherd protecting his sheep and the bond of trust between them. The good shepherd knows the sheep and they know the shepherd. Trusting in Jesus shouldn't be interpreted as believing that nothing bad is going to happen, that you're insured against all harm. It is rather a trust in a relationship. We can trust, we can be sure that whatever happens, Jesus will not desert us, not leave us. We have a solid link that he will not break. Trust is a relationship, and that means that it's two-way. Just as the shepherd knows the sheep and the sheep knows the shepherd, so the trust is two-way. There is then the remarkable idea that God trusts us. Now, is that a good idea? I love the story told of Jesus ascending into heaven and being greeted by the angel Gabriel. Gabriel congratulates Jesus on the successful accomplishment of his mission to earth and says, "What plans has Jesus got for the continuation of the work?" Jesus replies that he has left Peter and the other disciples to carry on. Gabriel looks somewhat doubtful and says, "And if they fail?" Jesus replies, "I have made no other plans." Throughout the story of God's relationship with humankind, we find God trusting other people to do things for him. He trusts Abraham, he trusts Moses, he trusts Elijah even when Elijah has given up hope. He trusts Mary and Joseph with his own son. And then Jesus entrusts the future of the church to Peter, who's just let him down. He trusts Paul, who's been hell-bent on destroying the church. Trust is at the heart of the best relationships. But beyond that, there are some people who we know that will be able to sort things out, take control and restore our lives. I hope you've known some people like that at times. In whatever walk of life you have worked or where you've had difficulties, the person who, when they turn up, means that you know things are going to start going right. A solution will be found. These are people we can trust. That feeling is something that all people yearn for, and surely it is the expression of that position in the 23rd Psalm that has made it so universally popular. It's the most widely known psalm and one that is requested and used by people with little other knowledge of the Bible or of hymns. We're back to the image of the Good Shepherd. Did Jesus have this psalm in mind when he described himself as the Good Shepherd? At the heart of those words, "Even though I walk through a valley as dark as death, I fear no evil, for you are with me." The last year and a bit have been tough on everyone, and the uncertainty and lack of definite knowledge creates fears. I remember watching the BBC News with Sophie Rayworth some time ago. She was presenting it, and there was some item about some issue of concern. I've forgotten what it was now. And she turned to one of the health correspondents who'd just presented a piece on the subject and said, "How worried should we be?" The answer to that question ought to have been, not at all. There's no point in worrying about it. You can't do anything about it. You can't change the situation. It's a matter of concern for some group of experts who may have to do something. Worrying is simply harmful to your well-being and health. Worrying in abstract like that is pointless and just bad for you. Now, as much as ever, the world needs the message of trust and confidence that we're in the hands of a loving God who knows us and what we need, who's not going to run off and leave us in the lurch. We have a good shepherd who has come that we may have life and have it in all its fullness.